Welcome. This is David Bowles, Human Meme. Today's topic, violence and the interwoven falsehood. In 1970, Russian author Alexander Solzhenitsyn won the Nobel Prize in Literature. In a speech he delivered, but did not recite in person as a lecture to the Swedish Academy, he said this about art and violence, and the structure of the simple truth against the complicated paradigm of the state. We shall be told, what can literature possibly do against the ruthless onslaught of open violence? But let us not forget that violence does not live alone and is not capable of living alone. It is necessarily interwoven with falsehood. Between them lies the most intimate, the deepest of natural bonds. Violence finds its only refuge in falsehood. Falsehood its only support in violence. Any man who has once acclaimed violence as his method must inexorably choose falsehood as his principle. At its birth, violence acts openly and even with pride. But no sooner does it become strong, firmly established, than it senses the rarefaction of air around it, and it cannot continue to exist without descending into a fog of lies, clothing them in sweet talk. It does not always, not necessarily, openly throttle the throat. More often it demands from its subjects only an oath of allegiance to falsehood, only complicity in falsehood. And the simple step of a simple, courageous man is not to partake in falsehood, not to support false actions. Let that enter the world. Let it even reign in the world, but not with my help. But writers and artists can achieve more. They can conquer falsehood. In the struggle with falsehood, art always did win, and it always does win. Openly, irrefutably for everyone, falsehood can hold out against much in this world, but not against art. And no sooner will falsehood be dispersed than the nakedness of violence will be revealed in all its ugliness, and violence, decrepit, will fall. What Alexander Solzhenitsyn understood in 1970 about Russia and the world and art and the lying state is something we need to understand now, here, today, in 2020 America, where our temporal hindsight only wishes it could be 2020, in violent comparison of the lie arbitrating the truth. And yes, art is a very effective and articulate form of violence, an artistic violence that hides itself in American patriotism and in the colors, red, white, and blue, of our flag. My human meme friend, America is currently split, divided by art and violence and politics, and we find ourselves standing apart in two nations, not one of rich or poor, or smart or clever, or dark-skinned and light-skinned, or even of the North and the South. No, America is violently cleaved by region, by geography, by choices of living in a home. We are split by rural and urban, suburban and the city. And that violent, physical distancing is happening in every state in America. The prairie and the pasture are not even in the same ecological reference. For the spike driven between the drought and the hoof is inseparable in its unreasonableness against the wind and the rain. And yes, that cleaving is deadly.
The difference between park and glen is dizzying in its invisible complexity. The crassness of mechanical design versus natural indemnification of purpose. And yes, we must live in that duality between psychic states, or we are forced to accept the chaos of two competing twin identities. The dizzying argument between shade and shadow is one of a glinting of the stars against the trees and the leaves, focused along a darkening horizon. The cries and the crises of the city and the farm are separable. They are not unique. They are not justifiable. The city wears a mask. The rural is open-faced. The city cannot own a gun or carry a knife. Rural aim their guns with knives. City folk don't hug or shake hands. Rural folk always shake hands and keep their word in touch. The country embraces you. The town condemns you. The artistry in the condemnation arrives wrapped in a bouquet of effervescence as the roots of the trees around us rot in the ground. You see where I'm going here. One is cautious and careful, the other is open and welcoming. And there is always the threat and action of violence seeping in between. There is always great suspicion on each side, a deep mistrust of the other. And that's when cruelty and demonization become acceptable. Violence isn't just a means to the end. Violence becomes the beginning and the middle and the end for both sides, as each side works against the other to preserve the status quo they have grown to know and love. Value is found in the defense, not in the reckoning. And let there be no doubt, there is great poverty in both urban core and rural rockaway. But the spirit of that shared suffering is lost in the defense of the myth of the reconstitution of revelation. And one might think that all would be worth the combined political human force. But no, poverty unites no one. Hatred unites. Gunfire unites. Violence binds. And blood runs and congeals in the most significant, if not suffocating, diatribe against the aesthetic of human goodness. Some people argue some people have earned their poverty by birthright or culture of color of skin, while others, unconvincingly, argue that their decrepit status in life is because the world is set against them. They believe no one ever has the chance to make it on their own. And those people for whom violence is always tolling refuse to rise up and win on their own. They prefer to be put upon and felt sorry for, so they may bask in their own imagined pit of influence, all while calmly blaming others. Our social buffers are missing. We once tried to be united, or at least we tried to pretend to unite in public, where it actually mattered, with manners and kindness in the public square, and in the church and along the cemetery. But now, damned be each other unto ourselves. I want mine, and you cannot have yours. The art of salvation has many masters. And the sad part is our health is in crisis. We are split between science and self-knowing. Who's to tell me what I don't know? They only know because I don't know, right? my view is just as good as your view because I'm a person too, right? Well, we've lost our logic and the comfort of those social buffers. We used to all want to be exceptional and special, but only if we earned it and only if we worked for it. Well, today everyone's their own special genius, self-defined, while we all watch the world burning into fiddling. And who owns the American flag? Is there a disconnect in seeing the Confederate flag and the Nazi flag flying next to each other, and the American flag at some deranged and staged public political rally? What does that sort of visual violence claim against those who choose to celebrate the losers in the wars of moral minds and kindly goodness? Why would any right American want to stand with slavery and the Holocaust as ideals to be publicly celebrated and upheld? The divine is in the reckoning, not the rendering. So, my human meme friend, as we think about this and we wonder, is all of that a rural versus city notion? Or is all of that more a United States versus murder notion? Oh, there is a difference, and it is up to each of us to confess the truth of our history and to know the reality of how we are headed headlong back into the temporal abyss of making the same mistake 10 times instead of only twice. We have lost the fine art of negotiation. Negotiation to save a nation. Is it too late to put the hatred and the split back in the bottle? Have we come too far to kindly go away with respect and honor for each other? Must every violent encounter end in death and dismemberment? If now we claim to wonder, how will all of this end, this split between the city zone and the rural state? Well, we must begin by dissolving the divide between science and self-knowing. And then we must accept that truth, the creative truth that there is salvation in research, and there is redemption in empirical data. There is a universal truth that can be used in our favor to save us from our self-inflicted fictional deficits, and then lead us out of the cave of self-reverence and into the grand light of becoming, once again, united as a nation in both paved asphalt avenue and gritty gravel road in the hollow. Thank you for listening. Be a human meme.